I never thought betrayal could wear a smile that looked so much like my sister's. That was the thought that kept echoing in my head the day I opened my front door and saw Lily standing there, suitcase in hand, eyes swollen from tears, pretending to be lost. She looked like family, sounded like family, and Lord help me, I welcomed her like family. The sky had been bruised gray all morning, the kind that presses low against the world, making every sound sharper, heavier. The rain hadn't started yet, but the air smelled of it. I remember wiping my palms on my apron, still damp from washing breakfast dishes, before reaching for the door handle. When I pulled it open, there she was. Lily, my sister Claire's only child. "Hi, Aunt Marion," she whispered, voice trembling. "Mom's gone." Those two words, "Mom's gone," fell between us like a broken glass, and I swear, even the wind went quiet. I didn't need her to explain. The hospital had called that morning. Claire was gone, and with her, the last thread connecting me to the family we once were. I stepped aside without a word, motioning Lily in. She moved like a ghost, dragging her suitcase over the worn rug. I could smell the faint sweetness of her perfume, something cheap, floral, and young, and beneath it, the salt of travel sweat and grief. She collapsed onto the couch, hugging a pillow as if it could hold her together. "I didn't know where else to go," she said softly. "You're all I have now." Her words pierced straight through the armor I'd built after years of disappointments, of broken promises from people I thought I could trust. But she was family, my sister's child. I couldn't let her fend for herself, not after everything Claire and I had endured together. So I said the words that would later haunt me, "Of course, sweetheart. This is your home now." For a few minutes, neither of us spoke. The old wall clock ticked too loud, and outside, thunder grumbled like an old man clearing his throat. I went to make tea because that's what you do when life falls apart. You boil water and pretend it helps. In the kitchen, I could see her reflection in the microwave door, small and hunched. My heart ached. She was only 22, too young to lose a mother, too young to carry so much loneliness in her shoulders. "Do you take sugar?" I asked. "One, please," she murmured. "Like Mom." The mention of Claire's name made my throat tighten. For a second, I was back in our childhood home, two sisters laughing over burnt toast, whispering secrets under a shared blanket. I never imagined I'd be burying her before we fixed all that went wrong between us. When I brought the tea, Lily reached for my hand. Her nails were perfectly manicured, pale pink, glossy. Not the hands of someone struggling. "Thank you, Aunt Marion," she said, smiling faintly. "I promise I won't be a burden." I squeezed her hand, meaning it. "You could never be." But as she looked around the living room, at the antique mirror, the oak cabinet, the family photographs neatly lined on the mantel, I noticed something strange. Her gaze wasn't nostalgic. It was assessing. I brushed it off. Grief does strange things to people. That night, after she'd gone to bed, I walked through the quiet house. The rain had finally come, tapping on the windows in steady rhythm. I stopped by the study, Claire's old letters still stacked neatly inside a wooden chest, next to the sealed envelope labeled will and documents. I'd been putting off dealing with it for days. That envelope held the last of our parents' estate, the house, the land, the little savings left after hospital bills. Everything legally under my name since Claire never wanted the responsibility. She said, "You take it, Marion. You always take care of things better than I do." I wondered if Lily knew that. Closing the door quietly, I went back to my room, whispering a silent prayer that taking her in was the right thing to do. But deep down, under the comfort of doing the decent thing, there was a whisper, a warning, that family can cut deepest when they get too close. A week later, the funeral came and went. Neighbors brought casseroles, half-hearted condolences, and whispers of sympathy. Lily stood beside me at the graveside, dressed in a sleek black dress that looked far too expensive for the occasion. She didn't cry. She smiled politely at everyone who offered comfort. I told myself she was just strong like her mother had been. Afterward, she returned to my house, kicked off her heels, and sighed. "I can't believe everyone kept saying you're the lucky sister," she said suddenly. I looked up from where I was folding her coat. "Lucky? Yeah, you got the house. The savings. The life Mom always wanted. Her tone was casual, almost teasing. But the words lingered, sharp and deliberate. I laughed softly, unsure if I was supposed to take it as a joke. Your mother didn't want this old place, Lily. She wanted freedom. She shrugged. Freedom's nice. But stability, that's better. Then she smiled, and for a split second, I saw something flicker behind that smile, something calculating. I should have seen it then. But love blinds us, doesn't it? Especially the kind that comes wrapped in shared blood. That night, I couldn't sleep. The rain had stopped, but my heart felt heavier than ever. In the darkness, I heard her phone buzzing faintly in the guest room, the sound of whispers, her voice low, secretive. I told myself it was nothing. After all, she was family. The weeks that followed felt like a return to something familiar, almost comforting. Lily slipped into my home as though she'd always belonged there. She made coffee in the mornings, scrolled endlessly on her phone in the living room, and called me Auntie M, the way she used to when she was little. At first, I liked the sound of it. It reminded me of summers long ago, when Claire would bring her for visits, her curls tied up in ribbons, her laughter spilling through the halls. But this Lily was different. Polished. Composed. Always dressed as though she were going somewhere more important than here. Still, I told myself she needed space. Grief changes people. My days had rhythm. I tended the garden, cooked dinner, and sometimes watched old TV shows in the evenings while Lily worked on her laptop. She said she was doing freelance design, but I never saw much of it. No clients called. No deadlines. No noise from a printer or sketchpad. Just her typing quietly, sometimes glancing at me when she thought I wasn't looking. One night, as I passed her door, I heard her voice, sharp, firm, not the soft, grieving niece I'd known. I told you, just wait, she whispered. She'll sign it soon. I froze. Then, after a pause, no, she doesn't suspect a thing. My fingers tightened around the laundry basket I was carrying. But before my mind could piece anything together, she started humming a sweet, familiar tune. The one Claire used to hum while cooking. It threw me off balance. Maybe it wasn't what it sounded like. Maybe I was hearing wrong. I went back to folding sheets, telling myself I was imagining things. After all, who would she be talking about? What could I possibly sign soon? The next morning, she was all smiles. Auntie M, you're up early, she said, reaching for a mug. You want me to make pancakes? She was wearing my mother's apron. I hadn't seen that apron in years. Where did you find that? I asked. In the back of the kitchen drawer, she said casually. It smells like cinnamon. I thought it was sweet. I forced a smile, ignoring the lump forming in my throat. That apron had been folded away with my mother's recipe cards, untouched since the day she passed. Lily flipped pancakes, humming the same tune again. My stomach churned. When she placed the plate before me, she leaned in, smiling too wide. You know, Auntie M, Mom always said this house would be mine someday. She used to tell me, Lily, your aunt is generous. She'll make sure you're taken care of. I looked up slowly. She said that. Lily nodded, sitting across from me. Yeah, she said you'd keep the family safe. Keep the legacy alive. That's why I'm here, right? I didn't answer. My coffee had gone cold. Days passed, and I tried to shake the unease. I told myself she was young, emotional, trying to make sense of loss. But small things started to shift. She began rearranging furniture, said the house needed a refresh. She moved the family portraits from the hallway into storage, saying they made the place look dated. And she started answering the door when mail came, always before I could get there. Once, I caught her holding a letter addressed to Marion Davis, executor of estate. When she noticed me watching, she smiled faintly and said, "Oh, I was just sorting the mail for you." I wanted to believe her. God help me, I wanted to. One Sunday afternoon, she came to me with a manila folder in her hand. Auntie M, you know how hard things are right now, she began softly. I've been talking to an advisor, someone who can help us with the property taxes and estate stuff. He just needs your signature on a few papers so we can get things sorted. She placed the folder on the table. Inside were documents, legal-looking, filled with fine print and seals. My name was there, yes, but so was hers, written neatly beside mine. What's this for? I asked, my chest tightening. Oh, just something about transfer authorization and shared ownership. It's just a formality, really. You know, in case something happens to you, so I can handle things. She said it so easily, sipping her coffee as if she were asking me to sign a birthday card. Sweetheart, I said carefully, I don't think we need to rush into anything. These things take time. Let's go over them properly. Her expression faltered, just for a second. Then she smiled again. Of course. I just thought you'd trust me. I nodded, my throat dry. I do. But trust doesn't mean carelessness. She gave a soft laugh, but her eyes, they were cold. That night, I opened the folder again when she'd gone to bed. Under the polite titles and legal jargon, there it was, a clause transferring ownership of my home to joint possession, effective immediately upon signing. It wasn't a formality. It was a takeover. My hands trembled. I sat at my desk until dawn, reading every line again, trying to understand how someone I'd fed, clothed, and loved could plan something so cruel. By sunrise, I'd made a quiet decision. I wasn't going to confront her, not yet. I wanted to understand how deep it went. Who was advising her? What else had she planned? But more than that, I needed to know why. Because betrayal, when it comes from blood, always has a story behind it. The next morning, she acted like nothing had happened. Sleep well? She asked, pouring orange juice. Yes, I lied. Like a baby. She smiled. Good. I was thinking we should start clearing out the attic this week. Make space. You've got too many old things up there. I looked at her, forcing a calm voice. Old things carry history, Lily. Not clutter. Her smile didn't reach her eyes. History can hold people back. She turned away before I could respond. But I caught it, that tone. Detached. Hungry. And in that moment, I knew. Whatever plan she had, it wasn't just about money. It was about taking over. My home. My name. My peace. And I wasn't going to let that happen. The first thing that nudged my nerves wasn't big. It was a smell. One afternoon, I opened the study door to grab a pen and caught a faint chemical tang, sharp, lemony, like the cleaner they use in bank lobbies. I don't clean that room with anything but vinegar and water. The wood is too old, too dear for harsh spray. The window was cracked an inch, curtain breathing in and out. My desk chair sat a little crooked, as if someone had slid it back and didn't quite push it in. The blotter had a new crease. It was all small enough to dismiss, the kind of things you let go if you want a peaceful life. Did you tidy in here? I asked that night, casual as I could manage. Lily didn't look up from her phone. No, should I have? I left it. I told myself I was being fussy. But then Saturday came, and with it a knock on the door that sounded like knuckles that didn't belong to this house. A man stood there in a navy blazer, hair shellacked, clipboard tucked to his ribs. Good morning, he beamed. I'm here to take some measurements. For what? I asked. He glanced over my shoulder, smile widening. For the estimate. Before I could ask another question, Lily appeared behind me, bright and effortless. Oh, perfect timing, she chirped. Andy M., this is Daniel. He's he's just helping us get quotes for some repairs. You said the roof needed looking at, remember? It was true. I had grumbled about the shingles after the last storm. But there was a script in the way she said remember, as if I'd already agreed to more than I had. I watched the man's eyes. They didn't rest on the ceiling lines or the crown molding. They drifted to the corners, the length of the hall, the width of the doorways. A measuring tape can tell you a house's size. Only certain men count steps like that. You're welcome to leave a business card, I said, careful and kind. But there'll be no measurements today. The smile slipped off his mouth like a sticker losing its glue. He turned to Lily, searching for permission. She pressed her lips together, then shrugged with a little laugh. Another time, she told him. When he left, I turned the deadbolt. We don't need repairs, she asked, voice small, surprised. We need them, I said. We also need to decide who's doing the looking. Not whoever shows up with a clipboard. A flush crept up her neck, fast and hot. I was trying to help, she muttered. I know, I said, and I did. I also knew the kind of help that arrives with forms already filled out. That evening, I baked apple crisp because the house needed something warm in it. Cinnamon, butter, browned edges, the kind of smell that mends thin places between people. We ate our bowls at the table without talking much. She said she was tired and went to bed. I washed dishes, wiped counters, and went back to the study. On the blotter lay a ghost, faint impressions pressed into the paper. The top sheet was clean, but if you tilt your head and catch the light just right, you can read yesterday's pressure. Names. Numbers. A short line of practice loops that looked like mine, not exact, but leaning toward me. The kind of practice a student does when she wants to learn a teacher's hand. I slid the blotter under the desk lamp, heart climbing the smallest ladder rung by rung. M-A-R-I-A-N. A long-tailed M. The R that hooks back to kiss the I. Whoever had pressed that into my paper had been tracing the air around my name. I pressed the lamp off and let the dark sit with me until my breath slowed. The next week wore a nice face. We had soup and grilled cheese on Tuesday. On Wednesday, I drove to the market for oranges, the kind that peel in one spiral. On Thursday, the neighbor, Mrs. Patel, caught me at the mailbox. "You had visitors yesterday," she said with a friendly eyebrow. "Two young folk with a camera, taking pictures of your porch. Are you getting it redone? Tell me your carpenter if he's any good." "Pictures?" I repeated, keeping my voice soft, neutral. "Oh yes. While you were out." "A tall girl and a boy with skinny pants," she said, wrinkling her nose. "They were very efficient." Click, click, click. I almost asked if they wanted to photograph my garden, but they left quick. I smiled until the conversation could end. Inside, I stood in the foyer looking at the door like it had lied to me. Two young folk. A camera. My porch. I pulled the lace curtain back and stared at the boards, at the swing I painted last summer, at the potted geraniums that survived the cold. Everything looked the same, but my chest had that empty elevator feeling, the drop before you brace. That night, I checked the front door's smart lock history on my phone, a silly gadget my nephew had installed years ago, just in case. 2 entries sat there in the log: 11:26 a.m. unlocked, 11:49 a.m. locked. I'd been at the market from 11 to noon. Lily's car was gone when I returned. When I asked if she went for a drive, she said no, she'd been napping. I've learned in my life that the worst doubts aren't thunderclaps. They're the slow seep of water through a ceiling, the round stain that grows while you're frying eggs and telling yourself it's probably nothing. On Friday, I went to the attic because I needed the wool chest. I moved slowly up the ladder, hand on the rail, dust rising in lazy, chalky swirls. The attic smells like cedar and old books. The house keeps its own weather up there. I crossed to the back, to the low eave where my father's army trunk sits, and behind it, the small wooden chest where I keep documents bound with ribbon. I unlatched the chest. The envelope labeled will and documents was there, sealed with the notary sticker Claire insisted on because it feels official, she'd said, laughing. I lifted it. The paper felt light, thinner than memory. I held it up to the attic's one-eyed window. The silhouette inside wasn't right. I'd packed that envelope myself, 3 thick stacks. Now it read as one. I didn't open it. Instead, I ran my finger along the flap. The glue cracked the smallest bit, like a whisper. Someone had lifted it and pressed it down again with care. My knees made an old person's noise as I stood. I slid the envelope into my cardigan pocket and brought the chest down to my room. I put the envelope into the bottom of my dresser, beneath the sweaters and the winter socks I never throw away. Then I sat on the bed's edge and let the weight of knowing settle into my ribs. That evening, Lily brought home a bouquet, grocery store lilies, of all things, white throats open, stamen dust already shedding. "For the house," she said, "too bright." "Thank you," I replied, and took them to the sink to trim the stems. The pollen brushed my thumb, golden and soft. I rinsed it off carefully, lily pollen stains. While I arranged them, she hovered, then said as if remembering, "Oh, funny thing. My friend sent me a link for a service that helps older homeowners manage properties. They do taxes, liens, all that scary stuff. They had your address on file somehow." She laughed. Small world. I set the vase down, listened to the glass against porcelain. "We can handle our own house," I said. "Of course," she sang. It's just, some things are easier with help. She drifted away. The lilies opened more overnight, scent thick as cream. By morning, I'd moved them to the porch. Saturday, she invited 2 friends from college for tea. They wore neutral colors and asked charming questions. How long had I lived here? Were the floors original? Had I considered unlocking equity for projects I've always dreamed of? Their smiles were clean and equal. When they left, one of them touched the banister like you touch a thing you're already counting. I washed the teacups and set them to dry. Nice kids, I said. They're brilliant, Lily replied. They help people plan. Plan what? Life, she said, and then she was done talking. On Sunday, the mail brought a glossy envelope addressed to me from a brokerage I didn't know. Inside was a preliminary comparative market analysis for my address, my house pictured from the street, a pretty photograph with my geraniums, the swing, the blue door I painted myself. The note said, if you're considering listing, we can have you under contract in 72 hours. I sat at the kitchen table, the paper cool under my palms, and felt anger rise in the slow, steady way of a tide. It wasn't hot or wild. It was practical. It was the kind that makes a woman tie on her shoes and go find a file folder. That evening, I took my keys off their hook, the long brass key for the garden shed, the small silver one for the safe in the closet. The silver one was missing. I stood there, hand open to the empty hook, heartbeat counting the facts. I don't lose keys. I don't lend them. I went to the closet anyway, knelt, and turned the safe's wheel. It opened because I know how to coax stubborn things. I learned that with men and with appliances both. Inside, the deeds were there. The birth certificates. The bond one never cashed. But the little no card where I'd written my lawyer's number wasn't. Upstairs, at 11:40 p.m., the house went quiet, the kind of quiet that makes you hear your own bones. I stepped softly down the hall and saw it, a thin band of light under the guest room door, moving like a low tide poured along the floor. Her voice floated through, that whisper voice again, quick and patterned. Yeah, she'll come around. It's about safety. Of course I'll be on the deed. No, she's not. She's too sentimental to be shrewd. A pause. The rustle of a page. No, we don't have to wait for probate. It's her primary residence. There's a workaround. Another pause. A soft laugh that did not sound like loss. I backed away, my fingers finding the hall's wainscoting, old paint cool under my nails. I went to the kitchen and poured water I didn't drink. Outside, the streetlight hummed, moths knocking themselves silly against it. I stared at the window and saw my face in it, older, yes, but not foolish. My mother's set jaw. My father's eyes when he'd decide a thing and then carry it to the end. When I went back to bed, I left the door cracked and watched the ceiling's faint geometry. Around midnight, floorboards whispered. The soft thwack of a tape measure. Close, far, close again. The hallway. The dining room. The living room. Numbers spoken against a phone screen in the smallest breath. What are you measuring, Lily? I asked in my head. Space or nerve? I didn't move. I let her count. The house has been measured before for cribs and couches, winter wood stacks, where to place the tree. It can be measured for schemes, too, and still belong to the one who knows the sound of each stair. When the footfall stopped, she stood a long time in the doorway of my room. I didn't look. I didn't blink. I waited until she moved on. By dawn, the lilies on the porch had dropped pollen onto the rail in perfect golden commas. The bond one never cashed. But the little no card where I'd written my lawyer's number wasn't. Upstairs, at 11:40 p.m., the house went quiet, the kind of quiet that makes you hear your own bones. I stepped softly down the hall and saw it, a thin band of light under the guest room door, moving like a low tide poured along the floor. Her voice floated through, that whisper voice again, quick and patterned. Yeah, she'll come around. It's about safety. Of course I'll be on the deed. No, she's not. She's too sentimental to be shrewd. A pause. The rustle of a page. No, we don't have to wait for probate. It's her primary residence. There's a workaround. Another pause. A soft laugh that did not sound like loss. I backed away, my fingers finding the hall's wainscoting, old paint cool under my nails. I went to the kitchen and poured water I didn't drink. Outside, the streetlight hummed, moths knocking themselves silly against it. I stared at the window and saw my face in it, older, yes, but not foolish. My mother's set jaw. My father's eyes when he'd decide a thing and then carry it to the end. When I went back to bed, I left the door cracked and watched the ceiling's faint geometry. Around midnight, floorboards whispered. The soft thwack of a tape measure. Close, far, close again. The hallway. The dining room. The living room. Numbers spoken against a phone screen in the smallest breath. "What are you measuring, Lily?" I asked in my head. Space or nerve? I didn't move. I let her count. The house has been measured before for cribs and couches, winter wood stacks, where to place the tree. It can be measured for schemes, too, and still belong to the one who knows the sound of each stair. When the footfall stopped, she stood a long time in the doorway of my room. I didn't look. I didn't blink. I waited until she moved on. By dawn, the lilies on the porch had dropped pollen onto the rail in perfect golden commas. I opened the desk drawer. Inside were scattered envelopes, business cards, and a sleek black notebook. The notebook wasn't locked. The first few pages were ordinary budgets, lists, little reminders. Then the writing shifted tone. Names. Numbers. Notes about liquidation timelines. And then, halfway down a page, my heart stopped. Marion will sign soon. The property value is enough to cover the full transfer. Once I'm listed as joint, we proceed. Proceed to what? I flipped more pages, hands trembling. Each one worse than the last, dates of phone calls, snippets of conversations, even a note that said, avoid confrontation until signatures complete. Emotional manipulation works best with guilt. I sat down on her bed, staring at the wall. I couldn't feel my fingers. Emotional manipulation. That's what all the sweet gestures were. The pancakes, the compliments, the apron. She wasn't mourning. She was performing. And I'd been the audience. By the time she came home that evening, I had the notebook back where I found it and the kettle on. I smiled when she walked through the door. She smiled back, bright, practiced. Long day? I asked. The longest, she sighed, slipping off her heels. You know how it is. I do, I said quietly. I really do. We had dinner together, polite conversation over chicken and rice. I watched her the way you watch a stranger pretending to be someone you once knew. She didn't notice. After dinner, she reached across the table, her hand brushing mine. You know, Auntie, I've been thinking, maybe it's time to sell the place. You could move somewhere smaller, cozier. You've done enough here. Her words landed soft, but deliberate. I like it here, I said. But you're alone. This house is big. You could have money for travel at a new start. I leaned back, studying her. And where would you live? Her eyes flickered. Oh, I'd figure something out. Would that something include this address? A pause. Then she laughed, a sharp, airy sound. You make it sound like I'm trying to steal from you. I didn't answer. She tilted her head, still smiling, but her eyes hardened. You don't really think that, do you? I think, I said slowly, that your mother would be very disappointed. That broke the smile. Her face went still, not sad, not angry, just empty. You have no idea what my mother said about you. Maybe you should tell me. She pushed back her chair, the scrape of wood sharp as a slap. She said you hoarded everything, that you always wanted to be the hero. You took her share of the inheritance because she was irresponsible. You kept this house, these things, and left her with scraps. My chest tightened. That's not true. She pointed toward the hall, her finger trembling. She cried about it, Aunt Marion. Every time she saw pictures of this place, she'd say, that should have been mine. I wanted to argue, to explain how Claire had refused her part, said she didn't want the burden of upkeep. But Lily didn't want the truth. She wanted fuel. You think you're better than everyone, she hissed. But you're not. You just got lucky. And I'm done waiting for my share. Your share? I asked quietly. She leaned closer. You don't deserve to die sitting on all this. For a moment, the only sound was the ticking clock. Then she stood up, grabbed her bag, and left the house without another word. I didn't cry. I didn't even shake. I sat there in silence until the air itself felt heavy. When I finally stood, I went to the study and locked the door. I opened the safe, checked the deeds still there. The chest in my room untouched. Then the notebook. I couldn't leave it where it was. I took it and hid it under the false bottom of the sewing drawer, beneath fabric no one touches but me. The next morning, I called the bank. "Good morning, this is Marion Davis," I said. "I just wanted to confirm that no changes have been made to my accounts or property titles recently." The woman on the line paused. "One moment, ma'am." I waited, heart thudding. When she returned, her tone had changed, careful. "We received an inquiry last week about updating co-ownership status. It wasn't processed because we couldn't verify authorization." My breath caught. "Who made the inquiry?" "I can't disclose that over the phone," she said. "But the person claimed to be your family." I hung up, hands shaking. So it wasn't just plans. She'd already tried. That evening, she returned, calm, composed, holding takeout. "I brought dinner," she said lightly, as if nothing had happened. I nodded, forcing a steady breath. "That's thoughtful of you." We ate in near silence. Halfway through, she smiled and said, "You know, I've been thinking, maybe we got off on the wrong foot." "I didn't mean what I said last night." "Of course," I replied, masking the anger rising in my throat. Then she reached into her bag and pulled out a folder. "Actually, I wanted to make it up to you," she said sweetly. "I met with a financial planner. He's amazing. He can help make sure you're protected, especially since you're getting older. I even had him draft the papers. All you need to do is sign and he'll handle the rest." She slid the folder toward me. The top page read, "Joint Ownership Authorization, Primary Residence Transfer." My name, her handwriting in the witness line. I looked at her. Her smile didn't falter, but her eyes gleamed with something close to victory. I closed the folder gently. "Lily," I said softly, "would you mind if I read this later? My eyesight isn't what it used to be." "Of course," she said. "Take your time." She leaned over, kissed my cheek, and whispered, "You can trust me." When she left the room, I stared at the folder until my tears blurred the ink. Then I locked it away next to the notebook. That night, I wrote a letter. To my lawyer. To myself. If you're reading this, something has happened. Her kindness wasn't kindness. It was hunger. I didn't know what I'd do yet. But I knew this. She wouldn't take what my family built with love and labor. She could play her game. I was done pretending not to see it. The next morning dawned soft and pale, sunlight trickling through lace curtains like forgiveness I didn't yet feel ready to give. The house was quiet, too quiet, the kind of quiet that hums in your bones. I sat at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee I couldn't taste, staring at that folder in front of me. Her gift of protection, she'd called it. The truth had finally broken open, and I knew there was no stitching it back together. It wasn't just betrayal anymore, it was a theft already in progress. But I'd lived long enough to know something. When you corner someone who's hungry for power, you don't fight loud. You fight smart. I spent the day moving slow on purpose. I cleaned the porch. I folded laundry. I wrote a grocery list, knowing she'd see it: milk, flour, trust, patience. I left it pinned on the fridge with a magnet shaped like a heart. She came downstairs late, all perfume and politeness. "Good morning, Auntie," she said, leaning against the counter. "You were up early." "Old habits," I murmured. "The sun doesn't wait for anyone." She laughed. "I was thinking of going into town today. Need anything?" "Actually," I said, keeping my tone mild, "I'd love some fresh flowers. Maybe white lilies?" Her eyes flicked up at that. She hesitated just a second too long. "Of course," she said finally, smiling. "You love lilies." "I do," I replied, smiling back. "But they stain everything they touch." When she left, I got to work. First, I called my lawyer, a man named Howard Ellis, who'd handled my father's estate 30 years ago. He still answered his own phone. "Marion, it's been ages." "Howard," I said, voice steady, "I believe someone's trying to transfer my property without authorization. I need to secure everything, the deeds, the accounts, all of it." There was a long pause. "Tell me everything." I did. Not all the emotion, not yet, just the facts. The documents, the phone calls, the attempted inquiry at the bank. He sighed. You did the right thing calling me first. Bring every paper you have to my office. And Marion, yes. Don't confront her. Not yet. I wasn't planning to, I said. But she'll know something's changed. Then let her, he said. Fear makes people clumsy. I gathered the folder, the notebook, and every legal paper with my name on it. I locked them in my car's trunk and drove to town with the radio off, my mind replaying every smile Lily had ever given me. By the time I reached Howard's office, my hands were trembling so hard I could barely hold the keys. He met me at the door, older now, silver hair, same kind eyes. Let's take care of this quietly, he said, ushering me inside. We spent 2 hours reviewing everything. When he saw the joint ownership document, his jaw tightened. This is a predatory draft. Someone knew exactly what they were doing. If you'd signed this, she'd have had legal claim to half your home within 48 hours. I felt cold all over. Half my home, I whispered. He nodded. And likely more, once you were, well, no longer able to contest it. I closed my eyes, willing the nausea down. Howard reached across the desk. Marion, you've always been careful. Let's keep it that way. We'll freeze all estate transfers, issue a legal block on any deed adjustments, and document every attempt made under your name. And the girl? I asked quietly. He sighed. Family or not, she's acting with intent. We can file a restraining order if needed, but for now, I'd suggest you record everything. I nodded slowly. Everything. When I returned home that afternoon, the first thing I noticed was the smell, vanilla candles. Too many. The second thing, she'd cleaned. The house gleamed unnaturally. Even the air felt rearranged. Surprise, she said, stepping out of the kitchen. I thought you'd like to come home to something fresh. I looked around. It's beautiful. See, she said, smiling brightly. We make a great team. I set down my purse. We do. She came closer, slipping her arm through mine. I know I got a little heated the other night. I didn't mean what I said. You're all I have, Auntie. I just want to build something lasting, you know. Her tone was honey sticky, sweet, meant to cling. I turned to her, keeping my voice even. Lily, I've decided to get my affairs in order, properly, through my lawyer. So no one has to worry. For the first time, her smile faltered. Your lawyer? Yes. Howard Ellis. Old family friend. He's handling everything. She tried to hide it, but a flicker of something, panic, maybe, crossed her face. That's wonderful, she said too quickly. I thought so too. I walked past her, pretending not to see the way her hand twitched against her side. Oh, and by the way, I moved the important papers out of the house. Just for safekeeping. Her voice was small, careful. You don't trust me? I paused, turning back with a soft smile. I do, sweetheart. I just don't trust the world. That night, I found her pacing in the hallway outside the study. She stopped when she saw me. I was looking for the stapler, she said quickly. In the study? Yes. I thought I left it there earlier. I nodded. Of course. But it's locked now. Oh. She forced a laugh. That's new. Some things are changing around here, I said. She smiled tightly, but her eyes gave her away. That was the moment she realized she'd lost control of the board. The following days were a quiet war. She tried being overly sweet, cooking, cleaning, complimenting. Then, when that didn't work, she switched to guilt. I feel like you're pushing me out, she'd say. I'm not, I'd reply gently. I'm just protecting what's mine. One morning, I found her on the phone again, whispering near the window. No, she's acting different, she said. It's like she knows. A pause. I don't care what it takes. She's old, she'll slip up eventually. I didn't slip. I recorded her voice through the phone's memo app, quiet as breath. On Friday, I had the locks changed. The locksmith, a kind young man named Peter, worked fast. When he finished, I handed him a tip and said, if anyone calls claiming to be me or my niece, don't duplicate a thing. He gave me a cautious nod. Understood, ma'am. That evening, Lily came home to find her key didn't fit. She jiggled the knob, frowned, and knocked. I opened the door, calm as ever. Oh, you're home. I had the locks updated. Why? She asked, the edge in her voice sharp now. For safety, I said. You never know who might wander in. Her jaw tightened. You're paranoid. Maybe, I said softly. But paranoia is what keeps people from being robbed blind. She stood there for a long moment, her expression unreadable. Then she said quietly, you're making a mistake. Maybe, I replied. But it'll be mine to make. She turned, stormed to her car, and drove off. I stood in the doorway, watching the taillights fade down the road. For the first time in weeks, I let myself breathe. The next morning, I mailed a copy of everything, the notebook scans, the recorded call, the false documents, straight to Howard's office. I also added a note in my handwriting, in case she returns with lawyers or lies, this is my truth. Then I sat in the garden, the same place my mother used to sit when she was angry, pruning roses until the thorns drew blood. The pain was small, clean, real. And it reminded me that I was still here. That night, Lily returned, but not to apologize. She came with company. 2 people, a man in a suit and a woman carrying a clipboard. I opened the door before they could knock. Evening, I said calmly. Can I help you? The man smiled. We're here for the appraisal. Appraisal? Yes, ma'am, he said. Your niece scheduled a home valuation for tomorrow's estate review. I looked straight at Lily. Her expression was composed, almost bored. I thought it would be helpful. You're clearly overwhelmed. I smiled slowly. Well, you wasted your time. The property isn't for sale and no appraisal is needed. The man hesitated. Ma'am, we have authorization from me. He checked his clipboard. From a Marion Davis, yes. Then you've been lied to, I said evenly. I'm Marion Davis. And I didn't sign a thing. He blinked, then turned to Lily. Ma'am? Her mask cracked, just a hairline fracture. This is ridiculous. She's confused. No, I said quietly. I'm very clear. The man and woman exchanged awkward glances. Then they thanked me and left. When the door shut, Lily turned on me, eyes blazing. You're destroying everything, she hissed. I met her gaze. No, dear. I'm protecting it. That night, for the first time since she'd arrived, she didn't sleep under my roof. I watched her tail lights disappear into the dark, the rain starting to fall again, soft and relentless. And as thunder rolled across the sky, I whispered to myself, family doesn't always mean safe. Sometimes it means surviving who they become. I didn't hear from her for 3 days. The house, once filled with her footsteps and artificial sweetness, felt strange in its silence. It wasn't peace yet, not really. It was the kind of stillness that comes before something gives. On the 4th day, the phone rang. It was Howard. Marion, he said, his tone measured, I just received an email from a real estate firm claiming they have your verbal approval to list your property. They even attached digital authorization forms. My breath caught. From me? From someone claiming to be you, he said. They sent scans of your driver's license, too. My driver's license is in my wallet, I whispered, reaching for my purse. It was there, intact, but the thought of her copying it made my stomach twist. Howard exhaled sharply. She's doubling down. We'll send a cease and desist immediately and file for an identity fraud claim. I'll also alert the local property registrar. Nothing will move forward without your signature. I closed my eyes, pressing the receiver against my ear. Thank you, Howard. And Marion, he added softly, you've done everything right. But I suspect she won't stop until there's an audience. Be prepared for her to make this public. He was right. The next morning, my phone buzzed with notifications. My neighbors, friends from the community center, the choir, the garden club, were all messaging the same thing. Lily's post. She'd gone on social media, painting me as the villain. The post read, my aunt is trying to take the house my late mother promised me. I've lived there for months, helped her, cared for her, and now she's locking me out. I have nowhere else to go. Please pray for me. There were hundreds of comments. People offering sympathy. Some condemning me outright. How could anyone kick out their own niece after her mother's death? Older people can be cruel when money's involved. That poor girl just wants her family's home. I stared at the screen until my vision blurred. It wasn't just betrayal anymore. It was humiliation. My phone rang again, this time, Mrs. Patel from next door. "Marian," she said, breathless. I saw the post. "People are talking. You know how this neighborhood is." I closed my eyes. "I know. Do you want me to say something?" she asked. "No," I said softly. "Let them talk. Truth doesn't need to shout." That evening, there was another knock at the door. This time, it wasn't strangers with clipboards. It was the police. A young officer stood on the porch, rain glistening on his hat. "Miss Davis." "Yes. We received a welfare check request. A family member claimed you might be in distress." Behind him, in the driveway, I saw her car. Lily, standing just far enough away to look innocent. I folded my arms. "Do I look in distress to you, officer?" He hesitated, eyes flicking over me. "You seem fine, ma'am. We just needed to confirm." "Well, you can tell whoever called that I'm quite capable of taking care of myself." He nodded, apologetic. "Of course. Sorry to bother you." When he left, Lily didn't move. She just stood there, her face unreadable in the rain. Finally, I opened the door halfway. "You can come inside if you want to talk." She hesitated, then stepped forward, not out of remorse, but calculation. The conversation started quiet, civil even. "I didn't mean for things to get ugly," she said, sitting across from me at the kitchen table. "I just want what's fair." "What's fair," I said softly, "isn't always what we think we deserve." Her voice sharpened. "You think keeping everything is fair? Mom sacrificed so much. You owe me, Aunt Marian." "Oh, you," I repeated, my voice trembling with disbelief. "I opened my door to you, Lily. I buried your mother beside my parents. I cooked for you, clothed you, trusted you, and you repay that with deceit." Her eyes flashed. "You're twisting it. Mom told me this house would come to me one day. You promised you'd keep the family legacy alive." "I did," I said, "by protecting it from greed, from lies, from people who think blood gives them the right to steal." She stood suddenly, her chair scraping the floor. "You're pathetic. You think you're some moral saint, but you're just an old woman scared of dying alone with nothing but your ghosts." I didn't move. I just looked at her, really looked at her. For the first time, I saw my sister's eyes in her, not the gentle, laughing ones from childhood, but the bitter ones from the end. "I loved your mother," I said quietly, "and I forgive her for her mistakes. But you're making your own." She grabbed her bag. "You'll regret this." "Maybe," I said. "But I'll regret nothing done in honesty." She stormed out, slamming the door so hard it rattled the frames. The following week was chaos. Rumors spread. Some neighbors avoided me, others came quietly to check in. The bank sent confirmation that all accounts were secured. And then a letter arrived. From her attorney. It was formal, impersonal, a notice of intent to contest estate ownership. She was claiming verbal inheritance rights, citing long-term familial residency and undue emotional manipulation. Howard laughed when I showed him. "It's a desperate move. She's trying to scare you." "She's succeeding," I admitted softly. "But not enough to stop me." He smiled faintly. "Good. Because we'll respond officially, and once this is on record, her credibility will collapse." A week later, the truth finally cracked open. The same real estate firm that Lily had contacted filed a complaint of fraud because she'd attempted to use falsified ID documents under my name. Her digital authorization forms were traced back to her email, her device. Within days, the police called me for a statement. I showed them everything, the notebook, the recordings, the forged papers. By the time they left, I felt lighter. It didn't take long for news to spread. Word traveled fast in a small town. The same people who'd once commented hearts and sympathy on her post began deleting them quietly. A few even sent me private messages. "I'm so sorry. We didn't know." Lily, meanwhile, disappeared from town or tried to. But reputation has long legs. Within weeks, she lost her job at the local firm where she'd been consulting. Howard called one afternoon with finality in his tone. "She's agreed to sign a statement withdrawing all claims." "It's over, Marian." "Is it?" I asked softly. He hesitated. "Legally, yes. Emotionally, that's up to you." I hung up and sat at the window for a long time, watching the wind stir the curtains. The lilies she'd bought weeks ago were long gone, but their faint pollen stains still marked the windowsill, golden, stubborn, impossible to wash away completely. Some marks don't leave, even after the person does. A week later, the police returned one last time, not for me, but to deliver a copy of the statement. When I opened the envelope, I noticed something strange. At the bottom, where she'd signed her name, she'd written a note in faint pencil beside it. I just wanted something that felt like mine. For a moment, I didn't feel anger. Just sorrow, deep, tired sorrow. Because that's the thing about betrayal. It doesn't start with greed. It starts with emptiness. That evening, I went outside to my garden, the one she'd once said looked old-fashioned. The sun was setting low, painting everything gold. I sat among the roses and whispered to the quiet air, "You can't lose what's rooted in love." And for the first time in months, I meant it. The house felt different after it was over. Not emptier, quieter. Quieter in the way a wound feels once it stops bleeding, when you can finally press your hand over it without wincing. I spent the first few mornings just walking through each room, touching the things that had always been mine. The chipped china bowl my mother used for fruit, the cedar chest my father built with his hands, the quilt I stitched the year Claire was pregnant. They weren't just objects anymore. They were witnesses. They'd seen what love could survive and what love could destroy. Lily's absence was like a shadow that had finally lifted, but every now and then, when I passed the guest room, I'd still expect to see her there, her perfume hanging in the air, her laptop open, her lies half-written in the blue glow of the screen. I didn't hate her. That surprised me. For weeks. I'd been sure that when this all ended, hate would be all that was left. But what came instead was something else, a slow, aching grief for the girl I'd welcomed with open arms and for the woman she could have been. Grief, I learned, isn't just for the dead. Sometimes it's for the living too, the ones who lose themselves while they're still breathing. Howard came by one afternoon, bringing the finalized paperwork, proof that my property and estate were legally secure. All sealed, he said, setting the folder on the table. No one can touch it now. Thank you, I said, pouring him tea. He smiled kindly. You always were the strong one, Marian. Your sister leaned on you, your parents did, even your niece, though she didn't realize it. Strength, I murmured, feels heavier than people think. He nodded. It usually does. Before he left, he turned at the door. What will you do now? I looked around the living room, sunlight spilling across the old wood floors. I think I'll live, I said simply. But this time for me. The weeks passed like slow pages turning. I started volunteering again at the library, where the children's section smelled of dust and crayons. I helped Mrs. Patel with her garden. I even joined the church choir again, though my voice trembled the first time I sang. People still whispered sometimes. That kind of story doesn't vanish overnight. But they whispered less each day. And sometimes, when someone mentioned Lily's name, usually in hushed tones, I didn't flinch. I just said, I hope she finds peace. Because maybe, deep down, she was still that little girl who used to run through my kitchen in her socks, chasing her mother's laughter. Maybe somewhere beneath the greed and bitterness, that child still existed. And I couldn't hate her for being lost. One Saturday, months later, I received a letter with no return address. Inside was a single page. Aunt Marian, I'm sorry. I didn't know how much of her voice I was carrying inside me. I thought I was fighting for what Mom never had, but I see now she never wanted what I was chasing. I don't expect forgiveness. I just needed you to know I remember the pancakes and the way you made tea when things hurt. L. I sat at the table for a long time, the letter trembling in my hands. There was no address to reply to, no way to reach her. But I whispered anyway, I forgive you. The words felt small but true, because forgiveness isn't a gift for them. It's the key that unlocks your own cage. The following spring, I repainted the front door, the same shade of soft blue that used to make my sister smile. I planted new lilies in the garden, too, though I hesitated at first. For a long time, I'd associated them with lies. But standing there in the dirt, I realized something. The flower wasn't guilty of the hand that offered it. So I planted them anyway. White, pure, clean. When they bloomed, They filled the air with the same thick sweetness that had once made me uneasy. But this time, it smelled like something new reclamation. Every now and then, I still catch myself talking to Claire in the quiet moments. I did what you wouldn't, I tell her softly. I learned to close the door when kindness isn't enough. And in those moments, I imagine she's listening, not angry, not envious, just sorry. Because sometimes love doesn't survive in the way we expect. It survives in the lessons it leaves behind. The night before my 63rd birthday, I sat on the porch with a cup of chamomile tea, watching the fireflies flicker across the yard. The house behind me was still and safe. The air hummed with life. I thought about how easily things could have ended differently. A single signature, a single moment of trust too easily given. But life, I've learned, turns on the small choices. The ones you make when no one's watching. And I chose to open my eyes. The truth is, Lily's betrayal didn't destroy me. It revealed me. It showed me that love without boundaries isn't love, it's surrender. And I had surrendered enough of my life already. Now, when people ask how I'm doing, I smile and say, peaceful. And I mean it. Because peace doesn't mean everything's perfect. It means you've made your peace with what isn't. That summer, I hosted a small garden gathering, nothing fancy, just tea and pastries for the neighbors who'd stood by me through the whispers. Mrs. Patel brought mango tart. Mr. Henderson from the choir played his guitar. And when someone mentioned how beautiful the lilies looked, I smiled. They're stubborn, I said. They bloom no matter what you bury beneath them. Everyone laughed, but I meant it. That night, after the last cup was washed and the laughter had faded, I stood in the doorway and looked at my home, my safe, imperfect, quiet home, and I whispered the same prayer I used to hear my mother say, Lord, let my heart stay open, but my doors stay locked. Because kindness isn't weakness. It's knowing when to stop pouring into cups that only ever take. And though my heart still aches sometimes when I think of Lily, I've learned to carry that ache the way you carry an old scar, not as pain, but as proof that you healed. It's been over a year since that storm passed through my life, not the kind that rattles the windows, but the kind that shakes the soul. Sometimes, late at night, I still hear echoes of it, the sound of her voice in the hallway, the soft click of doors I thought I'd locked, the sweetness of lilies left on my table like promises that turned to poison. But the house doesn't tremble anymore. It breathes again. I've learned that betrayal doesn't end when the liar leaves. It ends when you stop asking why. Because why is a doorway to madness. Why did she do it? Why me? Why family? There are no answers that make sense, only lessons that make peace. And peace came to me in quiet ways. In the smell of bread baking. In the sound of rain without fear. In the laughter of children at the library when I read them stories about foxes and courage and forgiveness. One of them asked me once, do foxes ever forgive the ones who trap them? And I said, sometimes. But only after they learn to run free again. I think that's true of people too. I keep her letter in my desk drawer, the one that simply says, I'm sorry. It's folded neatly, beside the deeds she tried to take and the will I've since rewritten. Not because I plan to leave her anything, but because forgiveness deserves a place, too, not as inheritance, but as evidence that love once lived here. Sometimes I wonder where she is. Maybe she's building a life somewhere far away, trying to make sense of herself. Maybe she still believes I was the villain in her story. If that's what she needs to survive, I'll let her have it. Because the truth, my truth, doesn't need to be defended anymore. It's written into every wall of this home. In the soft creak of the stairs when I rise. In the lilies that bloom outside my window, no matter how many seasons try to bury them. So if you're listening to this story, wondering how to move on from someone who hurt you, someone who wore love like a disguise, remember this. You don't heal by getting even. You heal by getting back to yourself. And family? Family isn't who shares your blood. It's who shares your respect. When I close my eyes at night, I don't see her anymore. Not the betrayal, not the anger. I see my mother's hands planting seeds. I see my sister laughing in the sun before life hardened her heart. And I see myself still standing, still home, still whole. Because in the end, I didn't lose everything. I kept the one thing that mattered most. My peace. Would you have opened the door for her? Would you have seen the danger behind the smile? Tell me in the comments.